What do you do when you're lost in space without a prayer of getting home? You science the shit out of it. So I have read the novel, well, technically I listened to the audiobook, but I've read the novel of Project Hail Mary, the movie of which comes out pretty soon. And a couple of things. Firstly, yes, it's very good. Secondly, I will have a spoiler section on the back end, and I will warn you before I get there. Thirdly, if you haven't seen all three of the trailers released for this movie, don't. They have basically taken the Castaway approach to trailers, which is show you more or less the entire freaking thing. Doesn't mean it won't be worth seeing the movie. Honestly, I think the way that the book progresses, what is good about it, if it translates over to the movie, then you are still going to have a wonderful experience even if you've seen those trailers. I would still recommend you don't. I don't think they had to give away as much as they did, which was virtually everything. But regardless, this is a novel from Andy Weir, who previously wrote The Martian, which I never read, but I did like the movie a lot. And I know the movie follows the book pretty dang closely. This has a very similar overall feel and flavor in that we are following a single lone occupant of a space vessel. That is the Hail Mary. And that occupant is Ryland Grace. Now, there's a couple of interesting things right off the bat. The first is that the entire thing is told from his perspective, and the flashbacks are actually diegetic. What I mean by that is generally in a flashback, it's something that is just inserted to give more context to the reader. Or in the case of something that's in first person, maybe it's something that the narrator lets the reader in on in order to fill in backstory. Here, the narrator actually only knows about as much as the reader knows. I mean, the narrator knows a lot more because of his science background, but I'll get into the science aspect. But in terms of what's going on right now, the reader, he doesn't know more than the reader does. Because part of this is like not getting too far into it, not far enough to be spoilers, I don't think. But because the trip involved a lengthy time in a coma, his memory is not mush, but muddled. Basically, he's in a state where when he's trying to figure something out or trying to make use of like a tool or a certain system, he will at that point remember, oh, here's when I learned about this and what this is and what this meant. And that is relayed to the reader at the same time. So whenever you get a flashback, that's not just for your sake as a reader. That's him realizing that information consciously at the same time. So it's like all of his memories are there, but they're not in like the front of his mind active memory. They've kind of got to be, they get pulled up as needed kind of instinctively. And he just has to learn to roll with that, accepting that, okay, I will remember the specifics of what I need over time. And like he's got access to all of his general scientific and mathematical knowledge and all that, but like the specifics of this, nope, this is weird and strange, but I'm remembering it as I need to. Is it a little bit of a narrative contrivance that it's done that way? I suppose so, but it's also novel enough that I kind of like it. I think it works pretty well. And Grace, I think, is a very endearing character to be in the head of. He's somebody who he very much takes okay, well, that's a problem, but I also can't do anything about that right now. What else can I deal with? Which, I find pretty relatable. And he's the way he chooses to prioritize stuff, but also just how excited he gets. Starting to realize what something is and how it works, or getting really excited to figure out what something is and how it works. Like the guy is both a scientist and science's biggest freaking hype man ever. Like he is so excited and enthusiastic at every new discovery that is made, be it in flashback or at the time that the story is more or less taking place. It's an infectious kind of enthusiasm, and I really do like it. As far as overall premise on this goes, this is a story in which, and again, I don't consider all this spoilers. This is corporate. This is like first half of the first trailer stuff. This is stuff that I think was acceptable to put in the trailer. So the sun is dying. And if you are immediately find yourself thinking, Sunshine, that Danny Boyle movie, no, very different tone. Very, very different tone. Similar starting place, though. The sun is dying. It is losing energy and losing heat. And initially, they don't know why. Nobody knows why. And Ryland Grace was previously a doctor of, I think it's microbiology. Exactly how that fits into everything going on, it does make sense. It does actually track because you follow that whole process. But he is, at the time this is being realized, he's just a school science teacher. And he likes that a lot better. He's not some disgraced scientist. Like, he left academia because he got fed up. Like, the last paper that he authored was basically a big middle finger to a lot of his colleagues, being like, I'm sick of y'all and I'm done. So he likes teaching a heck of a lot better, but he gets brought in on this for reasons that are difficult to get into without getting into more spoilery stuff. But he is sort of brought into this because he had posited something in one of his papers that looks like it may actually turn out to be true, and it might be linked to why the sun is losing energy. Now, I'm not going to get into all the ins and outs of what it is that's happening there, but as far as Project Hail Mary goes, what is happening there is that he is on the ship and he has been sent to Tau Ceti, which is a star, and it looks like the only star that is reachable in any way that isn't losing energy. So almost every other star that we can see is dying except for this one. And because they don't know how to stop what's happening, the hope is to send people here to find out why it's not happening there. And there were supposed to be 3 people. The other 2, unfortunately, didn't survive the trip. They passed during the extended comas, which was a very medically risky thing for them to put them into. And Grace is the only one left. And he has to do what he can to figure out what he can to get that information back to Earth so they have some hope of stopping or ideally reversing what it is that's happening to the sun. And it builds really well. It's very well paced. If I have one criticism, I think I can partially describe it without getting into spoilers. It's that there are some things that don't feel handled in the best way as far as the flashbacks go. There's 2 major things I'm thinking of. So we get very early on the 2 people that Grace was with who were supposed to be alive for this mission for him. When he remembers them, he describes them as, very good friends of his. And as we got into the flashbacks and as those characters were introduced, I was kind of expecting to get more of that, to see him get to know them and actually justify that very early thing in the book of him calling them, his friends and mattering to him. But it never really does. It kind of just takes it as read. And it's not that I doubt that he became good friends with these people, but it is very much a tell and not shown kind of element. And it's weird given that we are told it so early and the book has time to show it, but it doesn't. That throws me off a little bit. And then somewhat relatedly, it's very late in the flashbacks, that we're getting as they're coming up, that we see the point at which it was determined that Grace himself would go on this mission. And it feels strung out because we know he goes on the mission eventually because we're already here with him on it. So it feels like oddly drawn out how long that takes. Now, there is actually a reason for that we get later on. And it's even a pretty interesting reason. When I say reason, I mean to build the narrative that way. There are things that go on where I go, oh, okay, so that's why you kind of strung this out the way you did. But here's something that I'm going to point out, and I've pointed this out elsewhere, and I'm not going to say people disagree with me, but I feel like people don't always get me when I say this. So I'm going to try again. But if something feels off and is like taking you out of the experience, be it reading, watching, playing a game, whatever, but then you get to a point later on where you go, oh, that's why you did it like that. While that might justify the choice, that does not negate the way in which it was negatively impacting your experience up until the point you had that reveal. So if you're following me here, what I'm saying is it was taking me out of the book slightly. That part of my brain was going, yeah, you're really kind of teasing out this idea of like, ooh, what's going to happen that he's going to end up on the ship? And I'm like, I'm curious to find out, but like, why are you teasing it out so much? Because I know he's here. And that was kind of a distraction in the, I'd say, last third or so of the book. When we would go to the flashback scenes, I was being kind of distracted by that thought in the back of my head. And it did have a minor negative impact on my experience. So to later get to a reason, and I think a good reason why it's structured the way it does not erase the fact that it was negatively impacting my experience up to that. It's one of the gambles and sort of calculated risks that you take when you have later revelations. I hesitate to say twist, but when you have later revelations or information that is withheld for a while that will cause things to make more sense retroactively, it's really a balancing act to get that right. Because if you don't, then you've strung people out for longer than, whatever the payoff is worth. And this is part of why, boy, I'm really on a tangent on this, but this is part of why on the occasions where I've given feedback on written works from people and done beta reading for things, I do one of two things depending on what it is. When I've given feedback on a novel, I gave it chapter by chapter. I read a chapter and give my thoughts on that chapter, which means I'm giving the author my experience of having read this and not knowing what comes next, so that they get a sense of what the reader experience is more or less in real time. Or when I've given notes on like a script, I'm writing them down as I'm reading it. I'm not reading it all the way through and then going back to write notes, because I do think it is valid to realize what thoughts and things, good or bad, can happen in the moment that you might not think to circle back to once you have all the information, if that makes sense. So, like, that would have been my note to and Andy Weir, like I have any business giving the man notes. But that would have been my note to him if I had beta read this, was try and find that balance a little bit better than how it is in here. But that is, I've spent way too much damn time on it. That is kind of my only complaint. This is a really good book. And it kind of does the thing that I get the impression that The Martian was good at, and like the TV show House was good at, which is to use very technical sounding terms, but present them in a way that make you feel like you understand, even if you probably couldn't recite it back to somebody. Like, you didn't learn it intimately the way that, obviously, scientists and doctors in these areas would, but it feels very well imparted, and the side characters are great. Like, I think Dimitri's probably my personal favorite, but there are characters who literally show up 1-2 scenes and they feel so fully formed as people. They feel so unique and so real, despite very limited, time actually appearing. Weir's really good at that. So both our main character, who we spend a ton of time with, and little side characters in the flashbacks we only spend a little time with, all make some really great impressions. He's really good at that. I want to talk spoilers now. So you have been warned. I like it. It's good. I hope I can find the time to catch the movie in theaters. It's hard for me to get out to the movies these days, just scheduling. It's hard. Fitting stuff into my life is not the easiest thing in the world, but I'm going to try. There's your spoiler warning. So the revelation that I was talking about is the eventual revelation that he didn't volunteer. Like, we get the circumstances where, he wasn't really being considered, but the people who were being considered, there's this horrible accident, And it was like, well, it's going to be him now, but he won't volunteer. He won't go. And Strat, who's also a fascinating character, I love her. She's so great. She is so amazing in her pragmatism. It's so incredible to watch her go through things, and like people are like, if you do this, this will happen, and she goes, I understand that, and I'm not disagreeing with you that that's a bad thing, but I'm doing that in order to try and save the entire planet, so do it. And even this attitude of like, I will probably be held responsible and like put on trial for a ton of stuff I've done when this is all over. But if I am, that means that we saved the world long enough for me to be put on trial, and that means I did my job. Like, I love her. She's great. But she forces him on this ship. She drugs him and forces him on, figuring that once he's out there, I mean, he won't remember initially, because that's mixed into his drug cocktail. That's sort of the narrative contrivance, the selective amnesia drug sort of thing. But there's that. And then she's like, I think once you're out there and you know the circumstances, I think you'll do the job. Once you know that you're out there and you're going to die, I think you'll do the work, because fundamentally you're a good person. You're just too much of a coward to voluntarily get on the ship. So I'm going to make you. And I do think that revelation does work for this thing that I mentioned that I think is a little off. It just, I'm not entirely sure it fully balanced, but that is a payoff that does work for stringing that out a bit the way it does. So I haven't talked at all about Rocky, the alien that Grace becomes bestest buds ever with. And Rocky is great. I love just the dichotomy of Grace being a really learned and really good, thoughtful scientist, and Rocky being an amazing engineer. So Grace can think it and know what he needs to run the experiments he needs, but he can't build it. Rocky might not be able to think of these things, but he can build it. And so they're a great fit for each other. And it's also just, there's so much thought that went into Rocky and Rocky's people, like just his physical build. Like, we find out all this stuff about the very planet he comes from and how everything is vastly different because of, the difference in atmosphere, in pressure, and all this stuff. And he breathes ammonia. And there's so much thought that went into it. It's really great. And Rocky's got so much personality. And it's just a fascinating idea, this other civilization where really the one major thing that they have up on human civilization in terms of what they've developed is their building material, the stuff called xenonite. And that stuff is way better than anything we have on Earth, but they don't know most of the other stuff we figured out. Like, they don't know about relativity. They didn't even know about radiation. So, like, there's all this other stuff they haven't learned because they haven't had a reason to, but they can still build a ship that can survive the trip because they have way better building materials than we do. That they don't need to have known all this other stuff to still be able to get there. And yeah, the bond that builds between the two of them is great and wonderful. And I have seen Rocky in the trailers for this, and he looks just like I pictured him. He looks amazing. And I'm looking forward to the movie because this is a very good book. And it makes me want to, I'm making no promises to do this, but it makes me kind of want to find the audiobook of The Martian and give that a listen, because if there's a similar narrative and authorial voice behind it, I think I'll end up liking that a lot. And I love that movie. So yeah, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. And that final revelation of Grace as a coward, and that, he wasn't going to get on the ship, despite the fact that, thinking that he needed to try and do something to try and help save the world for the kids that he taught was the initial thing that spurred him on to dedicating himself to helping solve this problem in the first place. But that still wasn't enough to get him on the ship. That dichotomy is very human. It's a good book. He's a good character. It's a good story. I know I have my nitpicks. It's good, though. Have you read this? What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills. and enables me to do this as my living. And it is, in fact, how I was commissioned to review this particular piece of work. You don't have to pay enough to commission me to do stuff. There's all kinds of perks. You get ad-free versions of the main channel videos, look at my docket, early access to main channel videos, etc., etc., etc. Don't worry too much about it, though. What I really want you to remember, nope, that is the wrong sign off. I'm tired. It's actually kind of late when I'm recording this. We just try and take a relaxed attitude around here. Haha, that's the one. So just come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lafula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperol, Dave Hall, Oliver B, Mystic Shadow, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Ulrich, Twilord, Tracy Scrabbit, Pal Barabajoggle, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and to thank some folks from the lower tiers: Cyborg Ex Machina, Alex, and Lightning Spirit. You know, I've been saying Angry Casperol for ages, and I almost said Angie Casperol. You are distracting, the whole lot of you.